We have a couple of cases, and the exhibits, or at least the case we're going to hear, is located on the panels directly behind me. And it's going to be a variance case. So under the provisions of Title 30, Chapter 30.43 of the Glendale Municipal Code, a variance shall be granted if four required findings are present. And they are, number one, that the strict application of the ordinance would result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship inconsistent with the general purposes and intent of the ordinance. Number two, that there are exceptional circumstances or conditions applicable to the property involved or to the intended use or development of the property that do not apply generally to other property in the same zone or neighborhood. Three, that the granting of the variance will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the property or improvements in such zone or neighborhood in which the property is located. And four, that the granting of the variance will not be contrary to the objectives of the ordinance. The hearing will proceed as follows. First, I'll read a description of the application, then I'll make reference to any relevant city departmental reports and communications from interested parties. And then I'll ask the case planner to give an overview of the case and analysis and make a recommendation. Then I'll ask the applicant to come forward and give your name and address, and then present your case within a 15-minute time limit. And then I'll listen to all the others that want to speak either in support of or in opposition to the application. And again, give your name and address, and if you can do that within a 3-minute time period, that would be great. And then, if necessary, I'll give the applicant a chance to make any closing comments in response to testimonies that have been given by others. And then, most likely, I'll close the hearing and take the case under submission. I'll be making a decision in writing shortly after. And it'll take the form of a letter, which is sent to the applicants and to all those who have either spoken at the hearing today or who've given us written communication and who have provided their name and mailing address. The date of the decision is the date that's going to be on the letter itself. Now, under the appeal provisions of Title 30, Chapter 30.62 of the Glendale Municipal Code, decision may be appealed to the Planning Commission within 15 days of the date of the decision. Anyone wishing to appeal can get the necessary form and information from our permit center. Talk to one of our planners there, right here on this floor. And please fill out one of these speaker cards and provide it to staff if you haven't already done so. And in addition to being on television, the proceedings today are recorded on tape as part of the public record. And a reminder about the findings: if the evidence presented in conjunction with the application meets the criteria that I mentioned earlier, then the case can be approved. If not, then the request will be denied. And in the variance cases, the burden of proof is on the applicant. And we did do public notice for the cases today, and we notified by mail all the property owners located within 500 feet of the subject property, and there was a sign posted at the property, and the public notice was placed in a local newspaper. So, let me open the first case. She's at 1492 Dwight Drive. This is standards variance case number PVAR 2009-030. This was continued from January 13th, 2010. Applicant is Rodney Kahn. The owner is Razmik Gregorian. Our case planner is Velia Zematitis. This is an application for a standards variance to construct an addition to an existing single-family residence on a 9,624 square foot lot with an average current slope of 48.6%, whereby the project exceeds the maximum allowable floor area ratio and maximum number of stories, provides less than the required minimum interior setback, and features a retaining wall in the interior setback that exceeds the maximum height limit, located at 1492 Dwight Drive in the R1R Restricted Residential Zone, Floor Area Ratio District 2, and described as portions of lots 25 and 26, tract number 6708. And I understand from the case planner that the applicant is not ready to proceed on this and they need some additional time. So I think the best thing to do is give them about a month and see where we're at that time. So I'm going to continue case number PVAR 2009-030 to March 17th, 2010 without further public notice. And again, we'll see where we're at that time. Okay. And let me open the next case. This is at 1714 to 1716 Orchard Avenue. Standards variance case number PVAR 2009-042. And the applicant is Henry Ojendik. The owners are Neil and Juanita M. Servio Trust. Case planner is Rather Duong. This is an application for standards variance to construct a parking facility and retaining walls for an existing duplex without meeting the following zoning code requirements. And that would be number 1, a fully covered and enclosed garage. Number 2, providing the minimum interior setback for an accessory building. 3, providing less than the required eave-to-eave horizontal separation distance between detached buildings. 4, providing 3 parking spaces. Well, that's out. And 4, providing less than the required 5-foot interior setback for new retaining walls located at 1714 to 1716 Orchard Avenue in the R2250 medium-density residential zone, described as Lot 6, Block B, tract number 5106. As a note, the parking reduction permit case number PPR 2009-009 has been withdrawn since it's not necessary. So, let me turn that, rather than looking at all the correspondence, let me turn to the case planner first to give an overview and analysis and recommendation of the project.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Krause, and good morning. As you have stated, this project is located at 1714, 1716 Orchard Avenue. Originally, the applicant submitted 2 applications, one for parking reduction, which has been withdrawn, and a standards variance application. The subject property is zone R2250, which is one of our multifamily zone. The site was developed in 1926 with a duplex and a detached 2-car garage, as well as some retaining walls. The subject lot is irregularly shaped, consisting of approximately 6,200 square feet. While the buildings are situated on a flat area of the lot, the area located directly behind the garage slopes upward. This condition is unique to this zone, as most multifamily zones in the city, or most multifamily properties in the cities do not have any slope to them. Typically, they're all flat throughout. But the lots in this area, particularly the south side of Orchard Avenue, have upslope backyards. The subject site is located in a developed area within close proximity to a couple of major streets, Glendale, Glen Oaks Boulevard, as well as Chevy Chase Drive, and approximately about 200 feet from Glendale Adventist Medical Center. This neighborhood contains both single-family residences, even though the underlying zone is multifamily, as well as apartment buildings. This case came to the Planning Department via Neighborhood Services Division, which the division identified through a complaint that there was a hazardous condition caused by the 2004-2005 rainstorms. Specifically, the slope located at the rear of the garage, as well as the retaining wall, fell during this rainstorm season, which caused the property to sustain damages, as well as create some unsafe condition for the building at the top of the slope, as well as the subject property. The property owner was instructed to correct the hazardous condition initially back in June of 2005, and numerous inspections have been conducted by Neighborhood Services Division staff, and this situation still exists today. The case was eventually referred to the City Attorney's Office in November 2006. Renee Sada from Neighborhood Services Division is also here to speak more to this violation in this case, if necessary.
Okay.
The property owner would like to correct this violation. However, that's why the subject standards variance comes into play. In order to fully appropriately correct the violation and remove this unsafe condition, the applicant is requesting to demolish the existing detached two-car garage and remove the failed retaining walls. Now, based on the photos, you may wonder why it's necessary to remove the detached garage. Well, according to conversation with the applicant, the area behind the garage and the failed slope is very tight. So in order to fully and appropriately correct the violation and provide a safe condition for the neighbors to the rear as well as the subject property, the detached garage would have to be demolished in order to get the necessary equipment to the area in order to restore the failed slope. As a replacement for the required parking, the applicant is proposing to construct a 3-space carport instead of the fully required covered and enclosed parking garage the zoning code asks for. The carport will be located within the minimum and interior average setback and will not provide the 5-foot separation distance between buildings. The proposed garage would be located behind the duplex and will provide the required backup space, however, which would eliminate the need for drivers to back out onto the street, which, as you know, is prohibited in the zoning code for multifamily for properties developed with multiple units. To secure the failed slope, new retaining walls are also proposed. The retaining walls will also be constructed within the interior setback. The zoning code requires 5-foot minimum separation from the face of retaining wall to the interior property line. However, there are no height restriction in this zone for retaining walls. The requested standard variance application is necessary in order to rebuild the retaining walls and secure the failed slope to the degree where it would be strong enough and sufficient enough to correct the violation. Before deciding on the proposal before you today, the applicant explored 3 other options, which he will speak more about each one of them and why the chosen option is the best option to pursue. Each one had its own issues with the zoning code, and specifically, this one would be an improvement over the existing condition, given that, first of all, one additional parking space would be provided in an area where on-street and off-street parkings are deficient, and also because of the unique condition of the site as well as surrounding area. As I've stated before, the subject property is located within close proximity to Glendale Adventist, which may also impact the surrounding neighborhood and compete with the residents for parking by visitors to the medical center. Also, the unique situation that exists on the site, specifically at the rear of the property, and the upslope condition is another unique situation that does not exist on other multifamily lots. And the fact that the site is developed with a building already, it's not as if you are trying to construct a new project based on a vacant lot. So these are limiting and unique circumstances where the requested variances for the separation between buildings the setback distances from the interior property line are warranted in this case, and staff believes that positive findings could be made in support of the standard variance. However, staff also have provided some recommended conditions as part of the variance if the planning zoning officer feels that an approval would be appropriate. And that concludes my presentation. And the applicant is here to speak more on the project,
Okay, thanks, Radha.
as well as Mr. Rene Sala from Neighborhood Service.
It doesn't look like there are any really significant departmental comments on this case, are there? It's just standard.
Some of them are standard. Would you like me to go over the conditions, or would that be not
Just the
necessary?
comments, if there's anything you want to highlight that is sort of not standard meeting code requirements.
Well, one of the comments that I've included is that after having touched base with the building and safety plan check engineer, that they would like to see a solid wall provided at the rear of the carport along the west property line.
Right, and that
This
was...
wall is to be 1 hour fire rated.
Okay,
So that would be up to the applicant to work the details out with that division.
okay.
And also from Public Works, I've also included their comments in the staff report as condition.
Right, right.
One that seems to be not so standard is that the applicant shall obtain notarized written permissions from the adjacent property owners where remedial grading work is to be performed.
Yeah, that
These
looks like-
permissions must be obtained and submitted to the city before any building permit application shall be signed off by the engineering division.
It looks like that's going to happen on maybe 2 properties. The one to the east
To the east
and
as well,
south.
correct.
Okay, yeah, that's not really typical, is it?
No.
Well, I mean, that's typical of what they would probably ask for, but
But generally, in other situations,
yeah, usually
you
doesn't
wouldn't see
happen.
this because all work
Right,
would take place on the subject property.
right. Okay, thank you. So let me call the applicant to come forward and make your presentation. And again, give your name for the record, please.
I am Henry Ochendike, consulting civil and structural engineer for the client. Miss Juanita Cervello. Would you like me to go through basically what comments I have
Sure.
and what I have done already this morning?
Sure, go through the basics of what you're proposing, and then if you could highlight the 4 findings, because that's the key thing in a variance case. So if you want to describe the project and then go over the findings, that would probably
Okay.
be the best way to organize it.
All right. As Mr. Duong said, the proposal started to be replacement retaining walls for failed walls in Hillside. And unfortunately, the walls that are there cannot be replaced in kind due to the close proximity of the existing substandard garage. The problem with the garage in its current location, no matter how we build the retaining walls, shoring is still necessary, and if a classic L-footing retaining wall were to be built in addition to shoring, which is necessary to support the hillside until such wall were constructed, a substantial footing would project out into the site, basically a third to a halfway into the garage from both the southerly wall and the easterly wall to be replaced. Secondly, shoring is required to construct that wall So my proposal is what we have begun to call in our office a permanent shored wall. We basically hang the new constructed wall, the newly proposed wall, from the shoring, thereby obtaining a wall in the least amount of planned footprint possible. Yet the garage is still in the way for two reasons again. The wall or the garage is constructed so close to the wall that you cannot get in to work either removing the old wall or getting the new wall in. The new wall, as we propose it, again, the shoring has to be a part of any method of construction, takes up about almost 3 feet, 2 foot, I better get the right dimension quoted here. Two foot 4 inches along the east property line that the shoring and wall construction project out into the property. That's absolutely minimum, and in fact, that's just 3 inches less than shoring itself would take. And to build a 22-foot tall retaining wall would take about 9 to 11 foot wide footing in addition to that 2 foot 4. And the remaining on above grade would be up to about a 16 to 18 inch thick retaining wall. The permanent shored wall is shown here, takes up that 2 foot 4 maximum in the front half of the wall. The rear half gets up to 3 feet. Secondly, with the need to remove the garage, the walls that are there along the east property line are almost impossible to work with. They're antiquated walls of concrete, some masonry, but are coming apart, vertical cracks rotating into the site. We literally can't get the shoring in behind that wall and between the rear of the wall and the property line. So we are basically going to be saw cutting the wall, the old wall, at each of the locations of proposed piles or soldier beams, and building a ramp half the height of the wall in front of the wall in order to maintain its stability while construction progresses one pile or one soldier beam at a time. Once the soldier beams are in, 2 to start with, the wall can be removed between the soldier beam and lagging installed. This process basically proceeds up the east property line until the new shoring the temporary shoring is in place, and then the final construction of the wall can occur in the most economical manner at the contractor's timing pleasure. The southerly wall is quite simple and straightforward. It basically built to accommodate the three-stall carport perpendicular to the orientation in the east-west direction to the width of the carport. And it's basically behind the old wall, so shoring is functioning fully as it's supposed to be without any intervening effort. But the garage is in the way, the existing garage is in the way, no matter what you want to do to get construction accomplished on this site, get the construction of the retaining walls accomplished. As far as sequence of construction or the reason for construction and removal of the garage, I've covered that, I think. the one thing to fully get us into the project then is my withdrawal based on conversations I had with Rather Duong this morning, withdrawal of the parking reduction. Since that is not necessary, what are we going to do? Well, again, in my proposal to the project, I set out 4 schemes
Okay.
with which this project might be constructed.
Okay.
The first 2 of the 3 schemes, garages along the southerly, up against the southerly property, are
Close to
basically
it.
just making them legal four-stall garage, but also having a turnaround area, et cetera, forced construction beyond the property line. It just, you can't make it fit.
Okay.
And the third scheme does fit on the property, and I apologize for not showing the dimension on here, but scale-wise is explanatory enough. It's less than 16 foot 6 inches from a guard post right up against the house to the face of garage, thereby yielding the westerlymost stall impossible to get into for any car but a Mini. However, the design and layout, both with the 25-foot approach area in the front of a garage that the city requires, basically accommodates what we call the design vehicle. It's a esoteric, long-time growing vehicle that AASHTO, American Association of Highways and Transportation Association, puts out, and it's a vehicle, again, an esoteric, facetious vehicle that covers most any vehicle expected in the passenger category. RVs, large sedans, with some additional accommodation for driver inaccuracy.
Okay. The third scheme is a three space. The third scheme is a 3-space scheme or a 4-space?
I'm sorry. The third scheme is also only a 3-space.
A 3-space.
scheme.
Okay.
The fourth, if there's not enough width again to get a 4th space in, because a garage only requires, a garage would work, but it would be even tighter. So I went to a carport on this one again, just to show one last stall that could accommodate a vehicle and what those standards were. To get to a 4th stall would even be worse.
Okay.
It would be a scooter that you could get into. It would
Did
be
you try
long.
any schemes that were just 2 garage? What you're starting with is a 2-car garage, right?
It's a substandard 2-car garage. It's only 16 feet deep, and the parking stalls are quite a bit narrower. It's on the site plan.
Right. But I mean, the extra space is what? Is it a workshop area, something like that?
Yes, there's a workshop, and just people just the tenants have things in there that they either work with, tools or some storage, like all garages have.
So did you? It doesn't sound like you didn't do any 2-space garage schemes. Were they all 3? All of your options 3-space?
They were all 3, and the reason I didn't do 2 was because 3 worked to start with on scheme 4.
Okay.
Now, based on what I understand from Mr. Duong, if we could go back to a 2-car space, we still wouldn't be able to turn the vehicles around in that smaller space. That fortuitously, one of the main arguments that I've been kind of warned to make sure I fulfilled and had explanation for was how I was expecting the cars to turn around and
Right.
get out.
Okay.
I've done that on these two large blow-ups.
We have those in the file, I hope?
No, we do not.
Ooh. Because we don't really accept mounted exhibits. Do we have? Do
You can either have the mounted exhibit, or I've got an 11 by 17
Okay,
that I can
we could
give
take
you.
those. Okay, you can give those to Rather then.
Yes,
before you...
I can submit that to Rather for
Okay.
full explanation.
Okay.
It's just I was told to begin with, keep the concept that I presented to the planning department
Right.
to a minimum and be able to answer these questions. when
Right,
got
but I
here.
mean, you've got a 24-foot turning radius with your proposal there, right?
25 foot.
Well, that's 25.
And that's what I was
Okay,
under
well
the
then,
understanding to be.
okay, with that, we don't need much explanation then.
Yeah. Well, you really don't, except if this were only 2 car spaces, as I propose in V4 in the proposal that works,
Okay.
you wouldn't get a turnaround.
It would, what,
No,
cut into
no.
the corner of the house?
It would be, well, is what happens. Show this over here.
Yeah, we can put it up. We'll get an easel and I'll hold it up for now.
Okay.
And then you can, if you go back to the mic so we can get you on the mic. And then again, you can give us the reduced version and we could give you this one
Sure.
back.
Basically, this is called a 3-point turnaround. As the vehicle backs out of the southerlymost stall in the carport, it doesn't get much of a chance to turn, but it's enough room to at least initiate the second point turn, proceeding down toward the house. If that 11.5 feet or even 8.5 feet were taken out of the center stall and we had just 2 wide stalls, the second point would not give us enough room to back to the third point, again, back up against the retaining wall and slightly into the stall, and leave us enough room to get out the garage or to get out past the house. It would take a minimum of what we would consider a 5-point turn, some back and forth at minimum in order to get past the house. The house isn't shown, again, for convenience, but right at the bottom of car position 2, point 2, you'll see a small post. Because, again, in such a tight area, a protection post is necessary to keep the house from being banged into. So, and it doesn't basically take that much room up for the damage that it saves. So this 3-point needs the space, and is what I would like to propose based on today's conversation, is that I really have only 2 parking stalls covered, if that's what we're permitted to live with. And the third stall is there for convenience of both of the turnaround, and secondly, to give the scheme a third parking stall for guests or one of the tenants that might have 2 vehicles. It's like I say, it's needed. Even if I take the stall out and could get the turnarounds, move the retaining wall further into the rear yard area, it would save up to about 5 feet of retaining wall height in along the southerly wall at the easterly end of it. The area immediately behind the garage would still end up near the same, but the 5 feet could be added to or could be taken off of the east end, but then we wouldn't have the turnaround capacity or capability. So,
Okay.
Again, to save as much as I can for the client, I would like to say reduce the parking, the carport size.
What, move this a little that way?
Well, I'll get back and re-explain it in a minute.
Sure. Move this.
No, I just stopped the carport here. just be over these two
Okay,
stalls.
all right.
And this would just remain uncovered.
Right, but could you move that wall farther this way?
If, moving that wall
Reduce
at
the
all
height?
encroaches into this possibility.
Okay.
I could make further study and
But I
maybe.
mean, from an engineering standpoint, it could lower the height of the wall.
It could lower the height, but I'm never going to get the wall all the way down here.
Right, okay, I got you.
So,
Okay,
the shoring is already, these soldier beams, this one would not reduce the full 5 feet. If 5 feet could be saved right here, this would be less. And because we've got a work point that we've got to stick to at this point, even if it moves down here a ways, again, it'll reduce some in height, but not the full amount.
okay. All right. Do you want to hit some of the highlights on the findings then? And then I've got some
Okay.
questions.
So the findings then on page 2. Finding A, that a strict application of the provisions of any such ordinance would result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship inconsistent with the general purposes and intent of the ordinance. Basically, as Mr. Duong has said, and we've said in our application, to actually meet all of the zoning ordinance would put us off the site and create a condition on this property that really is impossible to meet. And also as a mediation, none of the other sites, even on the south side of the street, have the kind of parking that the code requires, because nobody's, everything was constructed way in advance of the current zoning ordinances, and nobody has met except the 2 or 3 condominium projects, which again started from zero when the old sites were, old construction was removed and a full condominium accomplished, that gave the planners full availability of making the project work. And I think as our scheme shows, even on a one-lot situation, parking can be accomplished and a turnaround work so that you can get back onto the street without backing on.
Technically, because this is a local street, we do allow backing out, but it's obviously more convenient when the parking is that far
that was
back.
my interpretation
Yeah, that was
when I
correct.
wrote the application.
That's correct.
That this is not a listed
Right.
secondary street or whatever it is.
It's a local street, and you've got only 2 units, so you can back out.
Yeah.
Obviously not very convenient, but...
No, and it's a tight area. It's just this works.
Okay. Any other findings you want to highlight? I mean, you've covered some of the uniqueness.
I think we've basically, the exceptional circumstances in B, that's what I'm really talking about, the hillside forces, that both the hillside and, as Mr. Duong said, the existing hillside plus the location of the improvements that will remain, the units themselves, you just can't make it work.
Okay. All right, then let me ask you some questions. One isn't related to the findings at all. How much is this going to cost should it be approved exactly the way you've designed it? What is this going to cost to construct this? I'm just trying to get a feel for how realistic this is, and is it really going to happen?
Well,
If we approve it exactly
I
the
think
way it is.
the realism or the realistic aspect of this project is questionable. the retaining walls
It's a lot of
and
money,
carport are going to cost at least $200,000.
So, I mean, obviously, you've designed this to be structurally realistic. Again, is this really going to happen, or, I mean, you're not the property owner, you're the applicant, so you don't have really any control over this, but
No.
I'm just wondering how realistic this all is, considering the overall layout of the property. So I guess that's something the owners will have to
Well,
decide.
the only thing I can do from a professional standpoint is respond to what the city says I need to do to meet the requirements.
Right.
Further, the expense of these retaining walls, my profession is structural engineering, civil with the title structural. I'm here to tell you that no adequately designed retaining wall has ever failed from seismic loads. Yet the new code requires us to put seismic loads on these walls. It almost doubles, not the whole wall. The gunite's going to be 10 inches thick no matter we build a 5-foot high tall wall or a 25-foot high wall.
Okay.
But the soldier beams get to be very expensive. They double in size.
Okay,
for
so
that
I just want to get kind of a feel for how realistic this is. Some other questions. What are these walls actually going to look like? What materials are going to be visible on the south and east wall when I'm standing there looking at these two walls? What am I going to be looking at?
Based on the recommendations of the planning department, they want us to stucco the wall. The last wall we did in the San Rafael neighborhood, we did the very same thing on. This was on the Pasadena side. And quite frankly, I'm not an architect, but it's, a partial day of work, and it adds extreme attractiveness to the wall. So
underlying structurally, is it going to be poured concrete or blocks, or what is it going to be, the structural part?
The structural part will be shotcrete. It's quick, and it uses the wood lagging and the temporary shoring aspect of the scheme as a back form, and that's the only form that shotcrete requires.
Okay. Now, on the east wall, am I going to be looking at exposed steel?
I'm sorry?
On the east retaining wall, am I going to be looking at exposed steel of any kind?
No, there will be no exposed steel. If you look at the details in the cross sections, the lower left plan, I think that's S4 or S5. It basically is cut off up to 2 feet below the top of wall. The structural steel is, and gunite swales are put over the steel.
So is this sort of a boxed out?
There will be a box out for the pilasters on the east wall because there isn't enough room.
Right.
And the way the wall is built, it's on the back side.
So you've got
of the
the
soldier beam.
shotcrete, is the structural, and then boxing around the vertical supports?
All of that's done with shotcrete.
Okay, and then you're going to cover that with stucco.
And we cover that with sprayed-on coat of stucco.
Okay. Let's see, the carport, exposed steel columns?
Well, if we reduce it to a 2-car carport, there will be 4 columns instead of the 2 that I proposed.
Right, instead of and the roof, some sort of rolled roofing of some kind?
It'll be rolled roofing, cap sheet roofing.
I have a feeling, see, the idea of our design review process is that if you have a detached accessory building, it's supposed to match the architecture of the house. So one way or another, regardless of what, if anything, gets approved here, I suspect it's going to have to match the architecture of the house, which is basically Spanish colonial revival. I don't see anything else being, even if it's a carport, being approved, quite frankly.
Well,
so can you do that?
Again, a parapet can be built on it, and a tile cap put on that.
Some sort of tile cap? Yeah.
though this is, if it does remain a carport doesn't have any setbacks, per the new code anyway, and we haven't had time, because I just got the condition.
About the wall?
But Glendale may have a specific elimination of that requirement, or let's say a fire-rated wall under more strict conditions. But the current code says as long as you've got two sides open, on minimum on a carport, there are no setbacks required for fire.
Okay, well, let's talk about why if we keep the parking in the same position, what prevents you from making a garage out of this, whether it's a 3-car or a 2-car? What's stopping
the additional
you?
thicknesses of the walls, and you don't get 8.5 foot. A 2-car garage may work, but you've got 6 inches, or 5 inches rather, of additional wall thickness on both sides.
Right. I mean, you're already, seems like no matter what you do here, you're going to have some code issues. So you're already going into the interior setback area with the design that you have. So other than interior setback to worry about, you could theoretically push the parking closer to the westerly property line. If you could do that, could you get a garage out of this?
There's
I don't want to redesign this for you, but
no.
again, this is
I understand
trying to
what you're saying.
minimize the number of variances that are required to do this.
Yeah. The carport currently is 4'5" off the property line.
So if we didn't worry about
3.5 feet.
we didn't worry about that.
Yeah. If we didn't worry about that, we can do a garage and still maintain a parking space on the side.
Well, something to think about.
That does, and it would also add slightly to the height of the retaining wall. Not much, half a foot.
But if we kept it away from the retaining wall, then it wouldn't.
Well,
We ended up with a 2-car garage.
again, the 2-car garage is supposed to have, either a 5-foot setback or,
Right, but
if it's less than
right.
5, not only the setback, but the building separation, the eave separation.
Right. Forgetting about
Getting
that
that,
for a minute.
we can make a garage work.
Oh, okay. Is the biggest deviation here, obviously you've got some issues with these walls. The biggest philosophical deviation is going from a garage to a carport in terms of trying to justify
Right.
how's this in keeping with the objectives of the regulations. The number of parking spaces is going to be the same or greater depending on whether you end up. So
Correct.
that's not a
Either
issue.
the 2 parking spaces
Or
plus
still- right.
a near third.
Or
just to get
even if we
turnaround.
don't have a third. So the real question is, can I justify or can you convince me that a carport's okay if you could still do a garage? So I guess that's something I'll have to think about. I don't know about the cost. Maybe a conventional 2-car garage cost similar to a 3-car carport the way you've designed it? Close?
The garage will still be more.
Still a little bit more.
Well, probably a push. I take it back, because one of the things we have in the carport are heavy beams.
Yeah, because you're spanning quite a distance with
Yeah.
this design.
Yes. The 2-car would drop down substantially.
Yeah, but
too.
a 2-car garage versus
a 2-car carport would be less expensive than a 2-car garage.
Yeah, right.
No question about that.
A 2-car garage versus this 3-car carport with the big span might
We're at a
be
push.
close. Okay. Again, cost isn't generally a real major concern in these things or a justification, but I just want to get a feel for what might work here. Okay. I don't see any other cards. Do you know of anybody else in your entourage that's going to speak?
Well,
to speak at
I
this
just
point?
thought it might be best if I just made a couple of, well, 4 or 5 comments
Okay.
of numbers or whatever that.
Okay, why don't we wait? I don't know. Renee, did you need to say something, or were you just...
I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, all right. I think we probably got the enforcement stuff covered. You probably just want the thing to be resolved. Do you know, I mean, it's been about 5 years. Do you have any idea what's been going on?
It just, it's,
When did they bring you on?
I'm sorry,
When did they bring you on?
within 3 or 4 months after they were cited.
Okay.
I've been a one-man office, and it just takes me a long time to get things done.
Okay. Well, go ahead, and if you want to make some closing comments, and then I'll close the case. Something to address any other questions maybe that I've
In the
raised.
analysis, just to be consistent, on page 3, the beginning of the last full paragraph, the width along Orchard Avenue is a full 50 feet.
Okay. The lot's a parallelogram, right? Yeah.
Yes, it is. But
You know what the width is perpendicular to the side property lines?
49, 7.5.
So it's almost 50.
It's
Okay,
almost
Okay,
50.
all right.
Yep. The 3-point parking or exiting that I showed you is only necessary for the southerlymost parking stall. With the configuration that's shown on that plan and this plan, the center stall is the only other one I worked out, and it's basically just a 1-point back out and pull forward out the driveway.
Okay. I think I got
The
that.
northerlymost stall would be even easier to get out.
Okay.
We've talked about 4'3" interior setback distance. Either we encroach further into it with a garage or with the wall that the building department has possibly requested. And that is on page 6, based on recommendation number 1, the 1-hour firewall, rated firewall along the westerly side of the carport would increase or decrease the setbacks.
Right.
And that's, I believe, those are the only comments I have.
I'd actually thought of a couple more questions. Rather brought up the comment from engineering about getting the permission from the adjacent property owners. Do you know if that exists already?
Yes, that exists already.
Okay. Is there a possibility, like of the property to the east, of actually doing more grading to reduce the height, or shaving it down a little bit, creating a 2-to-1 slope or something, and actually lowering the height of the wall?
We could do some of that. But
Rather
it's
than building it back up
It's
again?
filled hillside, or failed hillside from the top.
Okay.
There's somewhere between 8 and 10 feet, as I recall, 10 feet. We could take 2 feet, leaves 8. The maximum, if we graded the site, and that would take grading off of the, beyond the failed hillside, we could save 4 feet of the retaining wall.
Well, but only if the adjacent property owner.
But we'd have to get the property owner's
and
permission
pay for that.
to do that and to leave the graded slope in.
Right. And one final thing. These are pretty tall walls. It'd be nice to have some landscaping to partially screen them. You don't have as much room because of the turning radius requirement. It seems like there should be a way to get some landscaping to buffer some of it. Vine pockets or something, although I know what usually happens to those.
Well, is what we've done again
Shrubs.
on that.
Well, how much, is there a realistic possibility, based on the footings, of actually getting something to grow near the retaining walls, or is that pretty unrealistic? Given the You've got the
Let me just
wall,
look at
are
the
the
sections
footings
again.
going back? Well,
We've not put a footing under the wall.
Okay.
We found it not necessary.
Okay, so you
And
could-
so, yes, and that's
could
what we
grow
did in
some-
Pasadena. We had a very narrow area between the driveway and the wall.
Okay.
And vines don't take much area, and a minimum
Thing is
drip
to get-
system keeps them going.
Yeah, to keep the property owners from actually maintaining them after a while.
Right.
That's always another story. Okay, well, something to think about. All right, then, thank you.
You're welcome.
Since there's no other speakers, I will close this case, take it under submission, and I'll issue a decision in writing. Thank you for coming. Oh, thanks for coming. I'm going to give you a decision shortly in writing. Thank you.
This lady just came in, I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's now 10:40, and we're adjourned.